panel of judges covering Tennessee and the entire Sixth Circuit ruled the current ban on bump stocks is unconstitutional.
This pistol brace was sold in 2012. A guy walked into a gun store, bought it legally, walked out of the gun store with the pistol brace.
So you say that the brace changed, and so you had to implement this rule. Are you telling me that this brace is exempt from your rule?
You can argue how they interpret it, but here's the bottom line. They're dead wrong, and they're dead wrong for America.
Critics have long pushed to keep a bump stock ban in place.
In a split decision, the U.S. Supreme Court has struck down a Trump-era ban on bump stocks for firearms.
Political firestorm. In a jaw-dropping 6-3 decision, the U.S. Supreme Court has struck down the federal ban on bump stocks, those controversial devices that can transform semi-auto arms into rapid-fire weapons. The ruling has set off a whirlwind of reactions, from furious condemnation by liberals to celebratory cheers from arm rights advocates. Leading the conservative majority, Justice Clarence Thomas penned the opinion that a semi-auto arm equipped with a bump stock does not meet the legal definition of a mash gun. This distinction has immense implications, as mash guns face much stricter regulations. Thomas's stance was clear: the law as written did not encompass bump stocks, and it wasn't the court's job to change that. Justice Samuel Alito, joining in the majority opinion, threw in his 2 cents with a concurring opinion that didn't mince words. The Las Vegas slaying, which left 60 slayed and almost 500 injured, was indeed tragic, he acknowledged, but he argued such events do not alter the letter of the law. That event demonstrated that a semi-auto rifle with a bump stock can have the same lethal effect as a mash gun, Alito wrote, but an event that highlights the need to amend a law does not itself change the law's meaning. President Joe Biden was swift and scathing in his condemnation of the ruling. Standing firmly on his arm control platform, he called on Congress to step up where the court had stepped back. Today's decision strikes down an important arms safety regulation. Americans should not have to live in fear of this mass devastation, Biden declared. His message was unequivocal: ban bump stocks, pass an attack weapon ban, and take definitive action to save lives. Vice President Kamala Harris, ever the voice of arm control advocacy, was equally dismayed. Speaking at the annual conference of the 100 Black Men of America, Inc. in Atlanta, she lambasted the court's decision as a rollback of critical progress. Weapons of war have no place on the streets of a civil society, she insisted, echoing a bipartisan sentiment that had initially supported the bump stock ban.
If we don't vote, how we gonna ask for something next time? If you ain't got no voting power.
Been pretty busy. Yeah, I'm in these streets. In order for it to be real, it's got to hit the streets.
You talking about reparations. Ain't nobody finna give you no reparations and you don't vote.
And the only way that that will happen in a meaningful way is if the people are aware of what is available to them. This is a room full of leaders of every age who can help get the word out.
Voters have a choice in November, she reminded, contrasting the Biden-Harris administration's stance with that of former President Donald Trump, who notoriously told a community reeling from a school slaying to get over it. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer didn't hold back either. He characterized the ruling as part of the far-right Supreme Court's unprecedented attack on public safety. Senator Elizabeth Warren also chimed in, condemning bump stocks as devices designed to kill en masse. On the other side of the aisle, arm rights advocates were jubilant. The National Association for Arm Rights hailed the decision as a major victory. Dudley Brown, the association's president, took the opportunity to criticize the ATF. The ATF has wandered so far out of its lane for so long, it can't even find the road anymore, he quipped. Brown called for similar rulings on ghost arms and pistol braces, asserting that the ATF had overstepped its authority. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, in a blistering dissent, took a starkly different view. She accused her conservative colleagues of willfully ignoring the fatal potential of bump stocks. When I see a bird that walks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, I call that bird a duck, she wrote, arguing that bump stock-equipped rifles effectively function as mash guns. Her concern was palpable. The majority's decision would only pave the way for more mass slayings. Sotomayor's dissent highlighted the broader implications of the ruling. By narrowing the definition of a mash gun, she warned, the court was undermining efforts to keep such lethal devices out of dangerous hands. Her words struck a chord with armed safety organizations like Sandy Hook Promise and Everytown for Armed Safety, who argued that the ruling made it easier for potential mass slayers to access high-powered arms.
Supreme Court has just struck down a New York state law that restricted who could carry a concealed handgun.
State lawmakers have made New York State's gun laws some of the strictest in the entire country.
And then turn over your social media accounts. Once you have a permit, you'll also have to recertify.
Public reaction was intense. Sandy Hook Promise warned that bump stocks make arms exponentially more fatally, allowing multiple shots with a single trigger pull. John Feinblatt, president of Everytown for Armed Safety, was equally blunt. Arms outfitted with bump stocks fire like mash guns. They slay like mash guns, and they should be banned like mash guns. He urged Congress to rectify what he saw as a grave mistake by the court. However, the political reality is grim. With a Republican-controlled House, the passage of a bill banning bump stocks seems a distant dream. Despite the overwhelming public support for stricter arm regulations following high-profile mass slayings, the legislative gridlock in Washington persists. The case, Garland versus Cargill, brought by Michael Cargill, an arms store owner in Texas, challenged the ATF's 2018 regulation that required bump stock owners to destroy or surrender their devices. This regulation came in the wake of the 2017 Las Vegas slaying, one of the fatalest in U.S. history. Cargill, an Army veteran, argued that the rule was an overreach and ultimately convinced the conservative justices of his case. The ruling adds another layer of complexity to the already contentious arm control debate in the United States. While it represents a victory for arm rights activists, it underscores the challenges of implementing effective arms safety measures in a deeply polarized political environment. As the dust settles, one thing is clear. The Supreme Court's decision has reignited the arm control debate, setting the stage for future legal battles and legislative showdowns. With public safety and constitutional rights hanging in the balance, the nation's leaders and its citizens will continue to grapple with finding the right path forward.
Anyone 19 or older can legally conceal or open carry without a permit. In Missouri, a person has to be 21 to buy a handgun or 18 to buy a rifle. Missouri has some of the weakest gun laws in the country. Missouri does not require a background check to purchase.
Is going to protect the Second Amendment rights.
Ownership of handguns is pretty much prohibited by anyone under the age of 18 except for very limited circumstances, whereas in Missouri, only under the commission of a crime can a firearm be seized.
Bump stock ruling. In a highly contentious decision, the U.S. Supreme Court has struck down a rule issued by the ATF to ban bump stocks. These devices, designed to convert semi-auto arms into mash guns, are now legal once again in a majority of states, reigniting a fierce debate over arm control and public safety. The ruling in Garland versus Cargill has profound implications. With the federal ban lifted, states without their own prohibitions on bump stocks will see these devices return to the market, allowing attack weapons to be easily modified into mash guns. As many as 35 states are immediately affected, sparking widespread concern among arm control advocates. The legal battle began shortly after the ATF issued its bump stock ban. Although 2 appeals courts upheld the rule, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals struck it down, leading to the Supreme Court's decision. Eric Tershwell, executive director of Everytown Law, criticized the ruling, asserting that the ATF had the authority to classify bump stocks as mash guns. Mash guns, arms capable of automatic firing, have been tightly regulated under federal law since the 1930s, and bump stocks and other conversion devices are designed to skirt the law and mimic automatic gunfire. This decision by the High Court is dangerous and wrong. Survivors of the Las Vegas slaying have been particularly vocal in their condemnation of the ruling. Gina Morano Springman, a volunteer with Moms Demand Action, survived the massacre along with her sister. "I have lived through the terror and trauma that comes from when an arm is equipped with a bump stock, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone," she said. "We have the answers to combat arm crime in the United States, but today, the Supreme Court got it wrong and issued a decision that will only put more lives in the line of fire. The ruling has galvanized arm control advocates and legislators alike. Last summer, Senators Martin Heinrich, Susan Collins, and Catherine Cortez Masto introduced the Banning Unlawful Mash Gun Parts, or BUMP, Act, bipartisan legislation aimed at prohibiting bump stocks and similar devices. In the House, Representatives Dina Titus, Brian Fitzpatrick, and Dan Kildee introduced the Closing the Bump Stock Loophole Act. These legislative efforts reflect a growing bipartisan acknowledgement of the need to address the dangers posed by bump stocks. The Supreme Court's decision underscores the ongoing tension between public safety concerns and arm rights. While arm rights advocates celebrate the ruling as a victory against regulatory overreach, opponents see it as a step backward in efforts to prevent mass slayings and protect communities from armed crime. Dudley Brown, president of the National Association for Arm Rights, welcomed the decision. He criticized the ATF for overstepping its authority and called for similar rulings on other arm regulations. The ATF has wandered so far out of its lane for so long, it can't even find the road anymore, he said, advocating for more judicial checks on federal regulatory actions. As the debate continues, the focus now shifts to Congress and state legislatures. With the Republican-controlled House, passing new federal regulations on bump stocks remains a challenging prospect. However, the public outcry and renewed activism from armed safety organizations suggest that the issue will remain in the spotlight. The Supreme Court's ruling has undoubtedly reignited the national conversation on arm control, highlighting the need for legislative clarity and decisive action to address the complex challenges of arm regulation in America. That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.